Hi everyone. Someone left a comment on one of my posts. It was regarding home education, and they were saying that everyone should pull all their children out of the schools. And as it happens, I completely agree with them. However, I also fully comprehend the complexities that parents are facing. Our society is not geared to support people to stay at home and look after their children. In fact, by the time most people have their children, they're mortgaged up to the hilt. They have car payments, they have insurance payments, they have payments coming out of their ears, and they need to both work if they are going to maintain their standard of living. Now, I understand that there is an argument to be made for, reducing your standard of living, if you like, in order to look after your children. But you've got to remember that these people have never looked after children before, and they are doing that at that time. They have a baby there and they need to look after it, and that takes up an enormous amount of physical and emotional energy. It's an incredible feat looking after a small child, and to try and move house and change your entire life right at that juncture is really, really, really hard. And I understand why people would feel too overwhelmed to do it. Also, we've been conditioned to think that careers and earning money are the only way in which you can make a valuable contribution to society. So motherhood is not held up as something which a person could choose to do, and that has inherent value, equal value, as deciding to pursue a career. And we're conditioned in such a way that we don't get any. We're used to getting approval, because that's how an authoritarian school regime works. You work for approval, and when you get the grade, or when you get the teacher likes you, then you move forward. And parents were busy, so this is how you get your people approve of you. What is it? Affirmation. People need to be affirmed. It's natural inclination, and the way that they have been getting their affirmation is through education. Now, they're going through it, and then they're coming into the working world, and the way that you then get affirmation is through your job, and earning money, and that's and status. And for a person just to shift their entire mindset from perceiving that to be the most important thing in the world to perceiving looking after your child to be the most important thing in the world is actually far more difficult than you would think. I do not sit in judgment on people who don't have, whose children are in school, or who didn't change their lifestyle in order to have a parent at home. That is not the purpose of me talking now. What I want to say is I understand that there is no structural societal support for looking after children well. We have enormous amounts of research that do indicate that children thrive under conditions where they have close proximity to their parent, particularly in the early years, their mother. You're not supposed to say that, but it's true. The baby needs your breast, and they need your food. They need food from you, and comfort. And they are specially designed. Like, for instance, when their sight first comes upon them, they really can only see as far as from the breast to the face, and that's their first understanding of who it is that's looking after them. Now, that doesn't mean that daddy's not important. Daddy is vital, because if daddy doesn't help mummy can't do it, because mummy now can't do everything that she used to do, because she needs to be here for this infant. She needs to give up her bodily autonomy. She needs to give up, her priorities, and be there for that infant. And she needs her partner to look after her and look after the house and feed her so that she can feed the baby. Now, we are in such a situation that we just don't even think properly about anything. I mean, there is parental leave in some of the Norwegian countries, and people hold it up as a sort of bastion of forward thinkingness, that I think you can get 6 months, you can each get 6 months and you can run them consecutively. So this is seemed to be, just amazing, because it means a parent can be home with the child for a whole year. But the thing is, it doesn't take into account, it only takes into account the adults. It doesn't take into account the baby. A baby who has spent 6 months with its mother as its primary care, it doesn't mean that it doesn't love its daddy. But to go from, that situation to just one day for, no apparent reason, their primary care is a different person, that's a huge loss to a baby. And my argument is not that, my argument is that you should be home together with your child for a year when you have your child, or longer, because if you do it, it's not, I'm not saying, you have to do it, but if you do it, it is the most important thing that you'll ever do. And, mummy needs daddy to help her, and daddy should be home at the same time, because of course, yes, daddy's bonding with the child too. And the three of you, for your first child, are learning how to live differently and what your new priorities are. And it's so screwed up, the way that we treat children and young families. It's the most important thing that we treat our children well, because they are the future. They really are. And so what you've got all these, tertiary educated women, or women who are, everybody is able to use Google, asking questions to find out about best practice when they have their baby. And, what then happens is they are under enormous pressure to try and live up to these standards. But there is no support for them. So, for instance, we know that, breastfeeding your child and actually letting them self-wean is really, really good for them. And it's really difficult for a woman to do that at the moment, because culturally people think it's weird if you've got, a toddler or an older child, at the breast. And also it's exhausting. Feeding a child is exhausting. I had twins and I was determined to breastfeed them because I knew of the benefits. And it was the most difficult thing that I have ever done. I'm really glad I did it. But and I have quite a reasonable level of endurance. I have trained for competitive teams in certain sports, and I'm not, yeah, I'm not a lightweight. And it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done. And I had to sit in one place, so that they were so small, they were premature. They couldn't raise their heads like if I were to lie in a bed, so that they could actually get to the breast. I had to sit up and hold them on, either side of me on a couch, everything you're not supposed to do, except, it worked, and it meant that my babies had skin contact with me and breast milk on demand. um you know and but it was 10 months on a couch. I had sores on my back. And there's no recognition for it at all. In fact, if you try to do these things, the only kind of help that's offered to you is that, it's not help, it's a suggestion that you do it less well. Oh, just, don't bother, or bottle feed them, or it's okay, just bottle feed them, because you'll pass the 6 month mark. um and as a mother, you don't, you instinctively know what is right for you and your child. And if there's no support for it, it's tragic, because you're battling against, you're exhausted, you love your baby, you want to do right by it, you are confused because nobody is helping you to do right by it. Everybody keeps suggesting that it's not really that important how you treat it. um, so I became very passionate about all of this after, I'd had my two, because I think having twins is an experience. And I was accepted to Glasgow Uni to do a PhD, and it was on this sort of hypothesis, or research question of my choice, and of my construction. And really, what I wanted to do was bring into universities, tertiary education, some information about parenting, the research information that's easily accessible, because there's loads of it, but bring it to children, to young people, sorry, to young grown-ups, before they have children. So because in our society now, you can get to the age of, having a baby, 30, somewhere in your 30s, even in your 40s, having a baby, and you've actually never interacted with small children in your life. You went to school, you went to secondary school, you went to university, you got a job, you might have held somebody's baby for 5 minutes when they had it, laterally, but you have absolutely no experience of looking after small children or being with them, and what their demands are. And we don't have big families that, there's 6 or 7 children, and you just learn because you're needed to help. We have smaller units. So people can go all their lives, they have no experience of having children in their lives. They don't really, they prepare for it by, decorating the nursery and becoming excited, which is lovely. But ultimately, they have absolutely no knowledge about what what people understand to be good for babies and toddlers. And then they try and accrue it quickly when their baby arrives, quite rightly so. But they are trying to feed the baby as well as accrue the knowledge, as well as deal with all the changes in their life, and find some way to negotiate a new relationship with their loved partner, and to reapportion all the tasks that need to be done, and to learn how to be, the parent that you want to be. Because again, lots of people were brought up and their parents maybe were quite authoritarian, or they just don't want to, mimic some of the practices that their parents, put in place. However, to some extent you're hardwired to do that, because that's all you know. And so if you want to parent differently from the way that your parents parented, it is a conscious effort to do that. And that also takes time and energy and thought. And so if sorry, the PhD thing, it doesn't matter. I didn't have the money to pursue it. I wanted to bring tertiary education into the universities. What I wanted to do was say to children things like, young people, sorry, things that just, to me, they're children, but I know they're not. And I really do respect them. I actually love them. I think they're the most wonderful, they come into, they're so intelligent, and they're ready to make the world a better place. I really love them. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to demean them by calling them children at all. So I wanted to talk to these young people, and I wanted to say, okay, right, do if you leave your baby to cry it out method, their cortisol will spike, so their stress hormone will spike, but eventually most babies will stop crying. But what you might not know is that the cortisol hormone is still spiked, and it may stay that way for weeks. It's not that the baby is not stressed. It's that the baby knows you're not going to come anymore. Now, under the pressure of that knowledge, then most parents, don't want to do that to their child. But what you also need to tell young people is, right, here is the research on, why sleep deprivation is used as torture, and what it does to people's ability to function well and to be their best self. And here is your budget that you and your partner have, and these are your working hours. And I just want to know, sit and in your groups and discuss how you're going to parent. What do you, in within that framework that I've given you, what do you think is the best thing to do? And there's loads of these scenarios that you could present, because it's endless what's important once you have a child. So we move on to education, because that becomes something that you begin to think about, when they're a little bit older. All they used, you're thinking about it the whole time. But there's a plethora of options available to you. If you can afford it, there's private school, and then there's state school. But there are also small independent schools that offer slightly different curriculums, and you can home educate. It's actually your legal right, at least in Scotland, to flexi school as well. So that means you can have your children in school for a couple of days a week, and you can have them out of school for a couple of days a week. But the problem for parents is that, with home education, in an ideal world, what home education is, or if you've ever read any Gatto, for me, this is what home education is. It's about thinking about the definition of education. And it's about, thinking about what it is that your child actually needs to thrive in the world, and what is actually really of value and importance. And so obviously being able to read and write and to do sort of reasonably standard of mathematics, a reasonable standard of mathematics, those things are gifts to a child. Although pushing children to do these things actually has negative consequences when they're older in terms of their interest in them. So this race to get your children to be able to be literate and numerate, that's it's a fallacy. It shouldn't be occurring. We should be allowing children to take it on board at their own pace. If you read a lot to children and they love stories, eventually they get sick of the fact that they have to wait for you to read to them to get the next bit of the story. And once they're at the right age, they actually learn very, very quickly. Not some children decide to take it on very, very early, not saying, but generally it's boys actually who have other skills that they are trying to master, that biologically informed before they before they are interested in reading. My little boy, this is just an anecdote, it's nothing, but I read to my children and I created total rod for my own back because they love it. And it's about an hour every night, sometimes an hour and a half. And it's an absolute sort of fundamental part of our routine. It's actually something that has helped me to do what I do. I read my scripts or to talk to the screen because I've learned I've learned to actually read for a very long time. I do apologize because the knock-on effects you have to put up with me. But the why am I telling you about reading to my children? Indiana once said to me, I said to him once, oh, I might get some audio books, we're getting exhausted with all this nightly reading. And he said, but mommy, that would be like ice cream without the ice cream. And these are the little mini joys of home education, looking after your own child. So where do I want to start? I want to start by saying that, people say you need to send your child to school they need to be independent. But, independence is not taking a young child and putting them in a different environment and basically making them dependent on an unfamiliar figure. That is just sort of shifting their care to another person, a stranger, who may not have the same values as you. Independence is actually about a child, gradually choosing to put more distance between their parent and themselves. And they do it naturally and they do it differently. Different children are ready at different times. And when they choose to put distance where they can be away for an hour or two between you and them, they are truly independent because they made the choice to do that. So I said to you, there's Gatto, and ideal home ed would be that everybody is home ed, and so you have children everywhere. The community is full of children, and the ideal would be that we actually did like if you look back and you think about Little House on the Prairie or whatever, when you would have a schoolhouse and the children would be literate and numerate, but they needed to help their parents with the important business of living, and that I think is a really important part of home education. It's just learning how to live, like not learning how to be institutionalized, learning how to live, the passage of time and the things that need to be done every day in order to make make your little world work and make it have value and worth. But so so if you were I've lost the thread. So Gatto, and ideal situation. So the ideal situation is that your children can run around and they can spend some time standing by the butcher and watching what he's doing, and they can spend some time sitting by the shoemaker and watching what he's doing, and they can sit down by the local mechanic and kind of watch what they're doing, and in their own way they can find their place and their interest in the world, and they can learn from a huge variety of adults who see it as part of their responsibility and joy that they are going to impart what they know, in bits to young people. We don't have that anymore. So you bring your children out of school and they don't have as many children to play with as you would want them to. So people say, oh, home ed children, they need to be in school to be socialized. Actually, home ed children talk to a huge variety of people who are of different ages, because you live a normal life with them. So you take them to the shops, and you take them to different activities, and you take them to places, and they talk to people. And those people will be of all different ages. And my children, and every home ed child, almost every home ed child that I've ever met, is actually, pretty loquacious once they feel sort of safe and comfortable around other people. It's not about socializing them, it's about them having the opportunity to socialize for fun. And so there's not enough other children, and that's one of the drawbacks of bringing your children out of school. You want your children to be able to have friends and to play, and if all the other children are sort of penned up in this institution, then they're not available until after hours. However, you can make good of that, particularly in this country through the summer, because they then are available from like 3 in the afternoon until 8 at night, because of the light and because of bedtime. And that's a lot of playtime if you've got a nice enough community around you. But also, the more people who do home ed, the more children there are for your children to play with. But the big problem, there's so many big problems. You don't. It's very hard to think of yourself as being someone who is sufficiently wise to impart to a child everything that they need to know. It's also very difficult to think about, what is it that they really do need to know. And it's also very difficult to find a way to finance yourself if you're going to have one person home all the time. It's also very difficult for one person to look after children and to teach them, even if their teaching is more through living. That person, they're working just as hard as anybody else. They get up early, and they make breakfast, and they help people get dressed, and they read to them, and they put away the breakfast dishes, and they talk to them, and they discuss what they want to do that day, and they get them snacks, and then they make beds, and then they empty hot water bottles, and then they do some dishes, and then they put the laundry in, and then they do an activity, and then they make sure that they get their children outside, and then they get home and they have to make lunch, and then they need to clear up after lunch, and all the while the children want to talk to them and chat to them about whatever it is that's in their heads. And you know that if you don't allow them to talk to you now and show an interest, then they won't talk to you later, when it's important. They won't see you as somebody that they can chat to. And it gets exhausting, absolutely exhausting, because a lot of the stuff that they want to talk to you about is, oh my goodness, it's wild. It's right out there. Indiana's all about the portals, and Lullaby is, all about dolls and all sorts of things. I mean, they're both absolutely beautiful, and their imaginations are wonderful. And I feel, that it's my sort of deeply that it's my responsibility to encourage them, and not to meet their request for conversation with something monosyllabic. However, it was never meant to be that you're just one person alone with children. That's not, hunter-gatherer societies. The children, they are in groups, and they run together, and they learn from each other, because it's a mixed age group, and the women support each other, and the children support each other. They come to the women when they really need help, not that they need conversation from them all the time, because they actually have friends, and they also are hanging around with people who are incrementally older than them. The older ones begin to take responsibility for the younger ones, and the younger ones aspire to the skills of the older ones. And, it works beautifully. It's a great model. It's just we bust it because, we wanted to teach people how to read sufficiently well to pay their taxes. We wanted women to be available to work in factories. We had the wrong reasons for instituting our education system, and as a result, it's not an ideal institution. However, I was a teacher for a while, and I did used to think that there was hope for it, that it was just underfunded, that most people who get involved are really great people. They love children and they want to make a difference and they want to help them to learn. So there's lots of positives about it. But unfortunately, because of what's happening in the world, it has been hijacked, just like absolutely everything else. And it's being used as a tool to indoctrinate. And that's wrong. And it sort of puts parents in a position where no matter how difficult it is, they really should be finding a way to take their children out of the schools, because you don't want your children indoctrinated with anything. It doesn't actually matter what it is that they're saying. We can leave that to the side for the moment. When you think about it, you want your child to be able to read and to be able to write and to be proficient with their numbers. You want them to be able to hold a conversation and to source knowledge that's relevant and to know whether or not, that source is reliable, and to understand, bias. And you want them to be able to think for themselves. And that is academic education. And then a child may take that further if they have a genuine interest in any particular subject. But the um the rest of the sort of upbringing of the child, it was left to the parents. It wasn't the business of the teachers to tell the children, to give the children sort of a sense of morality. That was the parents. They're their children, and they impart to them, what they think is important to impart to them with regards to morality, with regards to religion, with regards to sex. These things were the I can't think of the word, but like the prerogative, or that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It was the parents. That was their responsibility. Schools were about making people literate and numerate, and parents were about bringing up well-rounded children. Now, to do that, people need time, and it needs to be a valued way. It needs to be perceived by society to be a valuable way to spend your time, a very valuable way to spend your time. Since society is such that we are all dependent on money. I wish it were different, but we live within that framework at the moment. I think that mothers that they should be state funded, because they are bringing up the next generation, and they deserve an income because they are working really hard. And we've created a society where we only really accrue people value if they are generating an income. And also it allows them a degree of feeling that they are making a contribution to the household unit, that they all, they need the money. And it enables the two parents to uh, have a level of see, I'm not really into all this equality nonsense, or equity. I'm not into equity. I am into equality. I think that people are equally important. They're not equally the same. And I feel that about women and men too. But I do think that in the household, if money is going to be the way that we all operate, we have kind of been socially conditioned to the person who's bringing in the money kind of gets a lot of the choices, even if it's just by default. There's a certain deference to the person bringing in the money, not always. And I'm not saying it's because anybody's bad. I'm just saying I think that is kind of, and so if women could also be bringing in money, that would help to make it so that one of the problems that couples face when they have children is eliminated. And also it would help women to or dads, because this is a point where I have said that, and I'll get lambasted for it, but the very young children need their mums, and they need the breast. But as they come away from that, and they choose to come away from that, they need their dads enormously. They need their dads while that's going on, to be present, and to keep them safe, and to keep their mum safe, and to provide for them, and to love them, and to play with them, and to rough and tumble with them. That's really important as well. There's so much that the dad is important for in those early years. I'm not saying he's not important. I'm just saying that the mother is vital. And the dad's vital too, but the mother is kind of vital to the survival of the baby, because she can produce the breast milk, and that's the kind of ideal scenario for the child. But as the child kind of moves away from that, the role of the father, the potential that for the father to really have even more input in what's going on with his child is, it's wonderful, because and it's necessary. And so it doesn't matter really who's home with the child to home educate them. Whoever's got the best temperament, I think, is probably a good idea. It's a very challenging undertaking. Staying calm and being kind all the time is hard, and trying to work out, where your lines are, and how you try to make sure that some of those lines are observed. These are very, very difficult things. Dads are wonderful at it. Mums are wonderful at it. Sometimes we're all useless at it. Doesn't really matter who's home with the children. But if we had a world, imagine if your whole community, all the children were home, and there wasn't pressure for them to attain anything in particular. Everybody has the desire that they will all be able to read, and everybody has the desire that they will all be able to write, and everybody has the desire that they'll do their multiplications, and they'll be able to add and subtract. But over and above that, and that coming with no pressure, and over and above that, their job is to play and to explore the world, and to work out, how things work by actually, trial and error. They love water, they love mud, they love all sorts of wonderful things. And if they have each other, and they have this sort of multi-generational group, they have, a certain sort of safety and joy, and there's always someone for every child. And if you had that, and you had one parent home in every house, to look out for all of them, because it's all your responsibility. The children are obviously the primary responsibility of the people who brought them into the world, but actually our children are our responsibility, and we need to start to view it that way. Imagine a community where all the children are not under pressure to perform. They are just enabled and supported to live and gain useful life skills. And you allow it the evolution such that, when they work out what they think they would like to pursue a bit more structuredly, which is not a word, they come to you and tell you who they are. That's the way it should be, because they're the one who knows who they are. They are them. They're not you. And it could be beautiful, but it's difficult to do it, and it's difficult to make it happen. But as I said, because of what is happening now, the education system is being used to fill your child with ideals and ideas and ideology that I know most parents, they're not happy about it. I mean, they're not happy about it. Parents don't really want sex in the primary schools, and nor should they. And it doesn't matter what kind of sex, or with whom, or whatever. And parents don't want anyone wearing lingerie around their children. Anybody. And parents don't really want their children filled with fear that the world's going to uh, explode, or well, whatever it does when you have a lot of carbon, and all the trees can produce oxygen, and everybody can breathe, and it's all fine anyway. But climate change, people, even if it were such that the world was going to fall apart, you wouldn't torment the children with it. It's not their fault. Nothing like that would be their fault, and they would deserve for you to protect them from whatever dangers there were in the world. Not that I believe that climate change is something that will, endanger them. I mean, I was filled with the fear of the ozone layer and CFCs. Even remember fridges and aerosols, and we're all going to die. And, we're all still here, and it's been going on, this kind of existential threat, forever. And you can read the literature of the Club of Rome guys saying that, it will bring people together if we can unite them with a fear, under the fear of, climate change, basically, famine and drought and so on. And, then they'll all think that they're fighting the same enemy, and that will make them easier to control. And people find it hard to believe that that would ever happen, and I understand that. I mean, who calls themselves the Club of Rome? It sounds like some sort of public schoolboy secret society, and it's meant to, so that when you talk about it, you sound like a lunatic. And it's very difficult to believe that people have malicious intent, because most of us don't. But I think that we all do understand that money, greed, and money corrupt, and it changes a person, and power, and we know that. You just know that. And unfortunately, these people, they have been talking to each other for a century about how to best sort of minimize and control the population, because they see that as their sort of divine right, and responsibility. And in some cases, I'm sure they actually think that they're doing the right thing by, I don't know exactly who, but whoever it is that they think is, you know, whatever divinity it is that they believe in, or the hierarchical structure that is in their minds. It's their responsibility to do this. Um, uh, so that's it. Because I never really had any sort of in my head about exactly what I was going to say. I feel like I have probably said the things that I wanted to say. I really would love it if people would get their children out of schools. You can start by flexi schooling your child, just asking for them to be out 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and seeing how, how it goes, and whether you enjoy it. And don't put too much pressure on it. Just enjoy them, um, and read to them a lot. Um, I understand, though. I understand how difficult it is. The problem is, if you leave them in the schools, though, we're done, because they're the next generation, and they will program them. They know how to do it now, and with the introduction of AI into schools, I mean, if there were malicious intent, that would be a really bad thing. And there is malicious intent, and it is a really bad thing. And it really would be wonderful if you pulled your child out of school, or your children. And you know what? Send me an email if you're thinking about doing it, and I'll try to support you. I know I'm not right next door to you, but I'll do what I can to support you. I'm Temora, TEMORA, at live.co.uk. Okay. I really mean that. I'm here. Can't I can't do what I can't do, but I will do what I can. And I love you all, and thank you so much for listening.